The key felt like a shard of ice in my palm, a cold, hard piece of a life I had never been allowed to know. I stood before the faded blue door of the house on Willow Creek Lane, the wind whipping stray gray hairs across my face, and the only thought in my head was a single, terrifying question. Who are you, Robert? For 42 years, that question had never once crossed my mind. He was my husband, the steady rhythm of my life, the constant, unwavering beat. But in the 6 weeks since his heart had given out among the roses in our garden, I had come to realize that I was married to a stranger who had kept a secret house for 15 years, a place he had forbidden me from ever entering. And now, the man who had demanded my promise had left me the key. It had all started on a Tuesday, with a phone call that shattered the placid lake of my existence. My best friend, Sarah, had a voice laced with the kind of dramatic flair she reserved for prime gossip. "Eleanor, are you sitting down?" she'd asked. I wasn't. I was standing at my kitchen island, sifting through junk mail, a picture of domestic tranquility. "I was at the county records office," she'd explained, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. And out of sheer boredom, I looked up Robert's name. Another property came up. A little house over on Willow Creek Lane, bought 15 years ago, paid in cash. The phone suddenly felt slippery, heavy. For a moment, a reflex born of 4 decades of loyalty took over. "It's probably an investment property, Sarah," I said, my own voice sounding hollow and unconvincing. But Sarah, ever the pragmatist, had cut through my denial. An investment he's never mentioned in 15 years? Her question hung in the air long after we'd hung up, a poisonous, lingering vapor. My mind, a place that had been a sanctuary of calm, predictable thoughts, instantly became a torture chamber of possibilities. The most obvious, the most cliché, the most painful one surfaced first: an affair, a second family, a life built in the shadows of our own, financed by the very stability he prided himself on providing me. I pictured her, younger, of course, with a bright, easy laugh that I had somehow lost over the years, a woman who knew the real Robert, the one who existed outside the quiet routines of our life. The thought was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. This was it. This was how my world ended, not with a bang, but with a hushed phone call from a bored friend at the county records office. The confirmation arrived a week later, a cruel twist of fate in our own mailbox, a property tax bill for the Willow Creek address, mistakenly sent to our home. His name was there in black and white, an official document testifying to his secret. That evening, I waited until after dinner. Robert was in his armchair, reading the paper, the lamplight casting a warm, familiar glow. The scene was so painfully normal, so achingly routine, that I almost lost my nerve. But the cold weight of the tax bill in my pocket gave me a strange, bitter strength. I placed it on the small table beside him. This came today. The tremor in my voice was unmistakable. He glanced at it. For a fraction of a second, his calm facade cracked. I saw a flicker of sheer panic in his eyes, a vulnerability so rare it startled me. Then, just as quickly, the wall was back up. His face became a mask of stone. He folded the paper neatly and tucked it into his pocket. "This is a business matter, Eleanor," he said, his eyes not meeting mine. The casual dismissal, the sheer audacity of it, ignited a spark of anger in me. "A business matter you've hidden for 15 years? My voice rose, sharp with a pain I couldn't contain. "Robert, it's a house. Another house. What is it? Who is in it?" He finally looked at me then, and the desperation in his eyes was staggering. It wasn't the look of a man caught in a lie. It was the look of a man protecting a wound. "There is no one in the house," he said, his voice low and strained. "It's just a place, a project of mine, And there is only one thing I will ever ask of you regarding it." He leaned forward, his gaze pinning me in place, his voice dropping to a command. "You are never to go there. You must promise me, Eleanor. Never." And I, a woman who had never known how to fight him, had promised. And now, standing before this forbidden door, the memory of that promise felt like a betrayal of myself. The living man had demanded my silence, but the dead man had left me the key. It was a posthumous challenge, a final, silent dare. I had to know what was inside that house. I had to know what was worth sacrificing the honesty of our last 15 years together. My fingers, numb with cold and fear, closed around the brass key. This wasn't just about his secret anymore. It was about my truth. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a rusty groan, a sound that echoed the ache in my soul. I pushed the door open. The air that rushed out to meet me was stale, thick with the scent of dust and something else, something faint but familiar, like old books and my mother's lemon polish. I didn't reach for the light. For a long moment, I let my eyes adjust to the dimness, my senses on high alert, preparing for the worst. I expected to see signs of another life. A woman's coat thrown over a chair, a pair of shoes by the door, a framed photograph on a side table. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, each beat a countdown to the final, brutal confirmation of his betrayal. I imagined the confrontation I would have with her ghost, the questions I would scream into the empty rooms. The silence was my only answer. Finally, my breath held tight in my chest, I fumbled along the wall for a switch. My fingers, trembling, found the cool, smooth plastic. I flicked it up. My mind refused to process it at first. I blinked, certain the grief and the stress were making me hallucinate. The room that flooded with weak yellow light wasn't another woman's home. There were no floral curtains, no strange photographs. There was only the past. I was standing in a perfect, painstakingly detailed recreation of our very first apartment. The one we rented as broke, hopeful newlyweds 42 years ago. The one that we had to leave in shame when Robert's first business venture, a small woodworking shop he'd poured his soul into, failed spectacularly, taking all our savings with it. The memory of that failure, his shuttered face, the quiet packing in the dead of night, had been a scar on our marriage, a place we never spoke of. And here it was, resurrected. Every detail was there. The faded, slightly lumpy floral sofa we bought from a secondhand store for $20, the cheap, wobbly coffee table I always covered with a lace doily to hide a cigarette burn from the previous owner, the slightly crooked Van Gogh print, Sunflowers, that I'd bought at a street fair, hanging on the wall. In the corner, a small record player, the exact model he'd saved up for months to buy me for our first anniversary. On top of it was a vinyl copy of Simon and Garfunkel's Bridge Over Troubled Water, our album. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the familiar, lumpy sofa. The fabric was rough beneath my trembling hands, a coarse, tangible link to a past I thought was buried forever. The ghost that had haunted me for 15 years wasn't another woman. It was a memory. It was his greatest failure, and as I was about to discover, his most profound, secret love. I ran a hand over my face, the tears hot against my cold skin. For 15 years, I had poisoned myself with suspicion. I had imagined him finding comfort in another woman's arms, sharing a secret life of laughter and passion. The reality was so much more complex, so much more heartbreaking. The other woman wasn't a woman at all. It was the ghost of the man he used to be, the young, hopeful dreamer who believed he could build the world for me with his own 2 hands. He hadn't been running to someone else. He had been running back to a time before he had failed. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the silence of the house pressing in on me. It was a silence filled with the unspoken words of my own husband. The air was thick with the weight of his secret, his shame, his quiet, desperate love. I thought of all the nights he'd come home late, smelling of sawdust and old paint. I had imagined him in the arms of a lover. The truth was, he had been here, sanding a piece of wood, hunting for a specific hinge, trying to rebuild the world I hadn't even realized he was still mourning. The thought was a fresh wave of grief, so powerful it buckled me over. I wasn't just mourning the man who died 6 weeks ago. I was mourning the 15 years we had lost to this misunderstanding, the chasm that had opened between us, all because he couldn't bear to show me his wounds. On the wobbly coffee table, next to a stack of old magazines from a bygone era, was a thick, leather-bound journal. His journal. Robert was not a writer. He was a man of ledgers and numbers, not prose. With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside, in his familiar, neat, almost architectural script, were years of entries. The first one was dated 15 years ago. June 12th. Bought the house on Willow Creek Lane today. A small place. No one will notice it. I don't know what I'm doing, really, but the silence in our own house is becoming too loud. Eleanor looks at me sometimes, and I know she's wondering where the man she married has gone. I wonder too. Maybe I can find him here. I turned to the cage, my heart aching. He had felt the distance too. I kept reading, entry after entry, painting a portrait of a man I had never truly known. He wrote about his obsessive search for the items to fill the house. September 4th. Lost another online auction for the record player. A man in Ohio outbid me. He probably just wants it for his collection. He doesn't understand. This isn't a collector's item. It's the sound of Eleanor's smile from that first year, before I let her down. Another entry, a year later, found a sofa today, 3 towns over in a dusty little shop called Second Chances. The irony isn't lost on me. The pattern isn't exact, but it's close. The lumps feel right. Felt a pang of something. Hope, I think. Maybe I can do this. Maybe I can build it all back. For her. To show her the man I was supposed to be. He had spent 15 years and a small fortune secretly rebuilding the place where we had been our happiest, the place before the world had taught him to fear failure. The journal was filled with meticulous notes on fabric swatches, paint colors, and the dimensions of a cheap bookcase we had assembled together. This house wasn't an escape from me. It was a desperate attempt to find his way back to me. The last entry was dated the week before he died. October 2nd. It's almost finished. Just need to find the right lace for the doily. I don't know if I'll ever be brave enough to show her. What if she sees it not as a gift, but as a reminder of everything we lost? This place, this is where I still feel like the man who deserved her. The young man with nothing but a dream who promised her the world. I lock the door to keep her out, but really, I think I lock it to keep my own fear and failure in. The journal slipped from my fingers. The tears that streamed down my face were no longer tears of anger or betrayal, but of a profound, heartbreaking understanding. The secret he kept wasn't meant to hurt me. It was meant to protect himself. The secret that had divided us in life had, in the strangest way, brought me back to him in death. I didn't leave the house that day. I couldn't. I stayed until dusk, touching every object, breathing in the air of our past. I put the Simon and Garfunkel record on the turntable. The soft crackle filled the silent house, followed by the familiar, gentle melody. As the music played, I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me. I remember dancing in this room, giddy with love and cheap wine. I remembered him sitting on this very sofa, his head in my lap, talking for hours about the future he was going to build for us. He had been so full of fire then. The failure of his business hadn't just taken our money, it had taken that fire, replacing it with a quiet, cautious man. But I knew this story wasn't just mine to hold. The silence had already cost us too much. The next morning, I called our son, Michael. "Can you meet me somewhere?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "There's something you need to see, something about your father." When he pulled up to the little blue house an hour later, his face was a canvas of confusion. "Mom, what is this place?" I didn't answer. I just held out the old brass key. "Your father's," I said softly, "and ours." I watched him as he opened the door, watched his face go through the same stages of shock and disbelief that I had. He walked through the small room slowly. He stopped at the record player. "I remember this," he whispered, his voice cracking. "He told me a story once about how he saved for months to buy it for you." He turned to me, his eyes, so like his father's, filled with tears. "All these years," he said, his voice thick with a new, raw emotion. "I thought he was just distant, cold. I never knew." I went to the wobbly coffee table and picked up the leather-bound journal. "He was afraid," I said, my voice finally steady. "He was afraid we'd see his failure instead of his love." We sat together on that lumpy floral sofa, the sofa of our family's beginning, and for the first time, we talked about the real Robert, the young, hopeful dreamer, the man who carried a silent shame for 40 years, the husband and father who loved us so profoundly that he built a time capsule to hold that love, because he had forgotten how to say the words. In that little blue house, surrounded by the ghosts of our past, my son and I began to piece together the man we had both loved, but had never truly known. It's been 6 months since that day. The little blue house on Willow Creek Lane is no longer a secret. Michael and I decided to keep it. We call it The Beginning. His wife, my wonderful daughter-in-law, helped me clean it from top to bottom. My grandchildren love it there. They think it's a magical little dollhouse. They listen to the old Simon and Garfunkel record and dance on the worn floors, their laughter filling the rooms in a way I'm sure Robert never imagined. Sarah came to visit once. She walked through the rooms, her hand over her mouth, and when she was done, she just hugged me and whispered, "I am so, so sorry, Eleanor." We are closer than ever. Sometimes I sit on the lumpy floral sofa, a cup of tea warming my hands, and I read from Robert's journal. I am no longer haunted by the ghost of a betrayal. I am kept company by the spirit of a quiet, complicated man who loved me more than I ever knew. His secret nearly broke us, but in the end, it brought us all back together. It taught me that the quietest people often have the loudest hearts. 15 years ago, my husband locked a door and created a chasm between us. Today, I sit inside that room, the door wide open, the house filled with the sounds of my family. The placid lake of my life is gone, and in its place is an ocean, deep and vast and full of a love I am only just beginning to understand. My name is Eleanor. I am 73 years old, and I have finally learned to read the language of a silent heart.